we'll, you know, try to find a way around it best we can. So hopefully you've got all the papers in front of you at least, and therefore I'll proceed to the agenda as it was published. There were two versions of it, just to bring your attention to the fact that there was a second version of the pack because Jane added another paper that had been submitted a little bit later. So any apologies for absence, Jane?
No apologies received.
Great, thank you. Okay, minutes and actions from the previous meeting. If everybody's got a copy of those minutes in front of them, I'll just run through page by page quickly. If there's any issues that you want to raise of accuracy, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Okay, and there weren't any actual recording matters arising from that meeting as I read it. So I think, therefore, we're okay to proceed to the main items in the agenda. So on that basis, then, declarations of interest. Petitions, reputations, and questions.
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll proceed then to item number 4 on agenda, which is the funding update. You should have that in your pack. I believe it starts on page 9, and Andrew Merry is going to give us that item. Andrew.
Hi, everybody. The funding update covers both 2021 and the original and the proposed budget for 21-22. I'll start with outturn for 2020-21. So overall, on the high needs block, the budget is showing an overspend of 118,000, and the main reason that we've overspent on the budget is that there has been a 12.5% increase in EHCP plans over the financial year. The in-year overspend will be added to the brought forward position of 458,000, making a total deficit on the DSG reserve of 576,000. On the early years block, we've shown a slight overspend of 17k, which will be taken from the surplus position of 135k brought forward. This is only still provisional, as we're not confirmed our funding level for 2020-21 from the DFE until July. So I will provide a further update on the final position on the early years block at the next schools forum. The schools block has spent anything we've been given in a year. There is a surplus brought forward, and that has been distributed as part of the schools allocation for 21-22. The central services schools block has underspent, which is mainly due to staffing, underspend against staffing costs in relation to the admission service. So it's a quick run through of the position against the DSG for 2020-21. Happy to take any questions on that if there is any.
Okay, questions, colleagues?
Okay, if there isn't.
Andrew, could I ask a question then, please? First of all, the central services block, the underspend leading to a surplus of 51k. Is that just going to be rolled forward indefinitely, or is there anything else that can happen to that money?
There is money that can happen to it. So the council are looking at what we can use to spend that money, how we can distribute that money. There's regulations around what we can and can't spend from the central schools block. So we're looking at options around that.
So okay. Could it go against the overspend on the high needs?
We're not allowed to transfer money into the high needs block from the central schools block.
You could transfer it back to schools, and then you're taking money out of schools to pay for the high needs. Is that not possible then?
I need to look at the exact regulations, but I don't believe you can transfer to and from the central schools block.
Right, it just seems a shame that money. Yeah, it just seems a shame that money sitting there, money that was provided for education, which of course we're all desperate to use, which actually can't be spent. It does seem frustrating.
Yeah, I will look at it and I'll report back at the next schools forum exactly what we can and can't spend against that central services to schools block.
Yeah, That would be appreciated, Andrew. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, I mean, obviously the item about high needs is covered in a number of different guises as we go through the rest of the agenda. So there'll be much consideration of that pretty grim picture, I don't doubt, as we go along. But if we're
sorry to butt in, Chair. Could we ask Andrew to also look at that with the early years block with the surplus as well, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do. Obviously, it's because it's provisional at the minute. That's why, you know, our funding will change and will be based on the census until we have confirmation of our funding. And the risk around the numbers around January time in early year settings, we just want to make sure before we can enter into any arrangements with schools from, we want to make sure what that final position is. So we won't get clarity on that until July.
Okay. All right. Any other points? Great. Well, if we don't have any specific points in regard to that, let's proceed on to item number 5, DSG recovery plan. And Louise, yes, sorry.
Carl, there was 2 parts to my paper. The second bit is schools funding for 21-22.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. Carry on.
So all it sets out is what funding we're receiving in year and what we are planning on spending the allocation on. So in all cases, we are proposing to spend what money we're getting in, other than 2 areas. One is the schools block, and that's because we're redistributing the surplus brought forward. And on high needs, we are predicting an overspend on high needs again for 21-22. That's despite having a 10% increase in funding. It has decreased from the deficit that we were proposing in year of 118,000 in 2020-21 to 43,000 for 21-22. I would caveat though that this is early in the year and our assumptions around how many children will come in year may be different. The actual may be different. So, and the impact on the recovery plan may have an impact on this as well. So it's a really early advisory that we're probably still going to overspend even with the 10% increase.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll comment on the effectiveness of the recovery plan in our next item, because at some point, obviously the idea of the recovery plan is to help us recover, and if it isn't doing that, then that's a point that we need to consider. But yeah, any comments from colleagues on 21-22 funding?
I think the high needs block is going to be a continual issue. It's not just Rutland that's in this position, and I think the work of the Education Inclusion Partnership is critical to, in time, try and reduce those costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, if everybody's asked what they need to about that, then we can go to item number 5, the recovery plan. And Louise, I think the recovery plan is, thank you first of all, there's a very large amount of information you provided for us, and I believe it starts on page 13 of your pack.
Yeah, sorry, it is a very long report, but it reflects the fact that there's been a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of energy and an encouraging amount of change, actually, as a result of many of the projects that are happening through the recovery plan. So I'd really wish to thank everybody for that, because it is a joint effort. But let's just dig into the kind of some of the detail, and obviously we need to make sure that we are going to cover the things that I want to ask you, which is, I'm obviously going to be updating you on the SEND plan initiatives. I want to make sure that we can agree the budget and priorities as I've set them out, if we're happy with that, but also to note the risks and issues, because as we say, we probably don't need to go into a lot more detail around the pressures because they're set out in the paper, but please do ask questions if you'd like to. Andrew will take those. But we do need to note the risks and issues that there are relating to any of these projects, because they're predicated on a system-wide change, really, to make the impact that we want in terms of the high needs block deficit. The second area will be to talk to you about our desire to extend and expand the coordination function. We're seeing real impact from having Caroline in that role. And we really want to safeguard that as we move forward, see her as a bit of a linchpin in this work. I'm getting incredibly good feedback, so we need to extend that. In order to do that, we're exploring a couple of different ways to do that, but one of them might be to recommission that, or to commission that through a direct award and an extension of contract, which would need a cabinet.
Can I just butt in just for a second, just to endorse what you've just said about Caroline's work, which is very good.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. That's really helpful. I have to work out who's talking, but I'm pretty sure that's you, Stuart.
Yeah.
But thank you. So yes, so that's an area that I think is going to be important. I'm asking for Schools Forum agreement that we use a larger chunk of the DSG, the Extend Recovery Plan funds that you've put aside for this work, to make sure that Caroline can dig into these other areas that we know we need to do. And then the third one is around the plans to deal with demand for secondary places for children with EHCPs from 2022 onwards. And there's a large amount of information in there that shows you how we've presented that to our secondary schools, and the process that we've taken to try to determine the right forward plans for that. Okay, so are there any questions specifically for Andrew around the budget? And if not, I'll move into the next area. I'm taking silence. I can't see any hands, so I'll assume that that's the case. But if there are any, please do ask. So just to remind you, there's £357,000 of additional.
Oh, sorry. Hello.
I'm sorry.
Hello, is somebody there? Yes. Just say your name and then we'll know who it is.
Hi, Louise. It's Rob Gooding here. How are you?
Rob.
Hello, Rob. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is the right place or not. I know I've got a little bit at the end for any other business, but I think it might fit in quite well with the SEN funding. I just wanted you to make everyone aware that there's a school, Greater Casterton, that the percentage of pupils with an EHC plan could reach 10% this year, and notwithstanding all of the notional SEN funding, etc., there's a shortfall in that school annually now of over £50,000. Now that's from a position of strength. This could leave the school in a significant and growing deficit position, where the school's both financially and operationally now unsustainable. Is there anything that we can do to support these sort of schools? Because the last thing that we want to do is have to turn away children with EHCPs. But currently the national context's 3%, and Greater Casterton's got 10% on roll. Is there anything that we can do? That's my question. I've been asked, our legal team's asked me to reach out and speak to you, and I've been pointed to this meeting to bring it up. Is this the right time to discuss that?
Well, I mean, Louise, what are your thoughts? Have you got any thoughts on that question?
Rob, I don't think it's for me to respond to that particularly. There are other colleagues here who might be able to respond.
Rob, may I speak? Sorry, can I, Chair? Can I?
Karen, yes, of course.
Add to Rob. Rob, we have 76 pupils at Edith Weston, and 11 of those have EHCPs. And so, like you, we are 14%, and we are really struggling. We likewise are submitting at best a 48,000 deficit, and it is not sustainable.
No. Not at all. No.
I mean, I think
one of the issues that we've got, Sharon, as well, is when we've done some cost analysis that the funding that comes in from other local authorities, because Greater Casterton is on the border, and I suppose it's significantly more from Lincolnshire. It's nearly a third more.
Yeah, and I know that from working in another school, as you know, which is a Lincolnshire school, and the funding is indeed less. But I think it is a really, really serious concern, the disproportionate amounts of children that are coming into some schools. And we're very proud of the work we're doing, but actually it's impacting on the other children who we also have a responsibility to do the best we can for.
Absolutely. So my question then is, what can we do to support schools like Edith Weston and Greater Casterton? Because everyone keeps talking about this notional SEN funding. Notwithstanding that, we're talking about two schools that could topple over. We're looking at a minimum of 50k each year.
I think it's worth looking at page, I think it's 17 on this, which has got a list of the primary schools and the number of EHC plans, because they are slightly different to what's just been said. And there are schools like Oakham C of E, for example, have got 31 EHCPs. And so it's not just to those two schools. I think this is worth talking about. And that then breaks down where the SEN support as well as the EHCs are. not in the pack.
Yeah, because that doesn't represent where we are as schools. Definitely doesn't.
Absolutely not.
How is the per student funding for EHCP determined insofar as it's different in Rutland from neighbouring authorities? Because that seems to be at the nub of the issue here. There seems to be a suggestion that some other authorities are funding at a higher rate, and therefore the question is, why is that?
So if I can give you just a really quick example there, Carl. So Lincolnshire are funding 32.5 hours for nearly 12,000, and Rutland County Council are 7,700. That's just one example.
Okay, well, I mean, Andrew, can you tell us why that is?
Yeah, the funding regime is set by schools forum. We, as a county, we haven't brought anything back to schools funding around our overall funding of SEN. Now, there's a number of reasons why I would say that's happened. Part of that, some of this goes back before my time, so I can't comment on obviously prior to that. But obviously, at the minute, we've got the SEN recovery plan in. The financial position on the high needs block isn't right now. The way to take this forward, I believe, is to set up a working group outside of this to see what we can do, to see if we can look at different funding regimes.
This is Stuart speaking, and all I would say is that any additional funding that is put into funding EHC plans will only increase the deficit position. And I speak as the head of a secondary with the largest number of EHC plans. And yeah, of course, I'm wanting more funding, and I recognise the pressures that our primary colleagues have just talked about, but it's not going to be without additional cost. And any additional cost is going to increase the deficit, which means more money is going to come out of every school to pay for it.
But Stuart, if I give you an example though, if you take Great Castleton, 18.8% of their GAG is paid out on EHCs. It's nearly a fifth of the whole school budget is just utilised for children with EHCs.
I think, well, can I interject here, colleagues, because I think that it's really important that this matter.
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said I think it's really important that this matter has been raised at Forum, because it is of, dare I say, existential importance to the particular schools that we're talking about, and therefore the representatives of those sectors have, responsibility to raise it. However, it's unlikely that we'll be able to resolve this at School Forum, and I do think that therefore further consideration needs to be given to it outside of this meeting. What the conclusion is a matter for that discussion to take place. But what I'm going to suggest is a hand back, just for now, a hand back to Louise, to allow Louise to go through the remainder of her update, but also for us to note at this stage, and then if we have time, we'll go back to the specifics of this debate, to note at this stage in the minutes, if we can, that there has been very serious concern raised about the sustainability of per pupil funding for EHC pupils with EHC plans in certain primary schools. That point has been made. I think that's important to make as a.
Can I also just put in? Sorry, it's Ali Chambers here at English Martyrs, but
Okay, Ali, yeah.
Completely agree with Rob. We are in exactly the same position, Rob, and we want to be fully inclusive, and we are really struggling. Our budget is really compromised anyway, and we are really struggling to be fully inclusive because of having to find the costs associated with supporting the children and providing the correct support for those children. It's becoming more and more difficult. And how many lots of the notional funding are we expected to find? We can't continue to do that, and we're on very tight restricted budgets, and we need to meet the needs of these children, and we're not able to do it in mainstream primaries.
No.
We don't have the additional adults, and then when we have to find the funding for that, it's really difficult to do. And we're going to get to a stage where we'll be turning parents away because we just cannot meet the needs of the children based on the finances of our schools. And I think it's hitting a real crisis point, and I think it's something that local authority need to perhaps sit with primary heads and talk further about, because you know, and the additional pressure on our Senkos. I mean, you know, you've got Senkos, they're classroom teachers as well, and they can't continue doing the work they're doing. We are getting an increasing number of children with additional needs in-year admissions, as well as new children coming in reception, and I think it's something
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for that. I'm hearing very loud and clear, colleagues, that there is really serious concern about this, and this problem needs resolution one way or another in the relatively near future. I'm hearing that this isn't something we can just delay for the next meeting, or, you know, kind of note and then move on. So that acknowledged. And I think, therefore, there needs to be discussions outside of this meeting where matters are properly aired and points are made when people have had a chance to kind of prepare their responses, as it were. So I'm going to suggest that we do that. But in the meantime, can I pass back to Louise? Can you still hear me, everyone?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
You can still hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Sorry about this. My screen keeps going off for some odd reason. Louise, I'll pass back to you for now. You proceed with the item, and then should we get time at the end, we'll come back to it. But if we don't, we'll call, if necessary, an extraordinary additional meeting, whatever the appropriate forum is, because this matter is too serious and too immediate for it to be dealt with fully in the course of this meeting. Is that all right, colleagues?
Can I just speak? Sorry, I just need to say that it is exactly the same within early years as well, within our settings with SEND, and the needs of the children are increasing, and the money that we are getting is not sufficient to be able to meet those needs anymore. So we too are in the same situation.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful as well. Yeah. Okay, Louise.
Thank you. So there are three things that I need from you. I just want to be as brief as I can now, to make sure that we have time to get back to your. Sorry, the computer screen's doing something weird. So yeah, just make sure that we're agreed on the budget priorities for this year for the SEND recovery plan. If that's that's how we want to progress. They're really, that the reason we put this 5-year plan together is because we want to have an impact, and we're starting to see the green shoots of that happening. If people have other ideas of things that we can do that would make an impact, please come forward with them. But these things are starting to see a grip, I think. To acknowledge the risks and issues, as I mentioned, to talk about the Education Inclusion Partnership coordination function extending, and to talk about how we make sure that as many children with EHCPs can progress into mainstream provision at secondary school from 2022 onwards, because we can see the pressures that are building there. Right, so we've got that commitment of 357,000 yearly for the 5-year recovery plan. We established the EIP arrangements in February last year, but we've obviously had a very bumpy year, and things haven't gone quite as smoothly as we would have liked them to. I can hear an echo. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can hear the echo, but we can hear you. We're just about doing it. Okay, Louise, carry on.
That's fine. So all schools in the primary sector are now signed up to the partnership, which is terrific. And the first notional payments will be taken in September 2021, which is what we'd agreed. There's been university positive feedback on the speed, quality and appropriateness of the support from the IP coordinator, and there's really good feedback on all of the interventions as well, high level of satisfaction with those. The Eip Panel itself, what the Eip provides so many different things, but for example, the specialist teachers who are linked to each of the schools, not just at primary, but now at our secondary level as well. But the panel itself, which is obviously a sector-led panel, has received 80 cases since instigation, and 69 of those are open and working. The others have progressed to the right position wherever they needed to be. Either the children have moved out of county or they've gone on for an EHCP because that's actually what was required. SEMH teachers are, I'd say they're doing less now intervention work in some schools because practice has improved or practice has changed. And they're moving more now to whole school practice, which is absolutely exactly what we hope to see, and is what actually was seen by Caroline in her other authority, as people became more confident in certain practice. There's great evaluation feedback. I've listed a lot of that in one of the appendices, so you can really get to grips with what that looks like. But of course, there is still a challenge in rises in numbers of EHCPs. We know that COVID will have had an impact on that, and it's difficult to model precisely what that impact was. And of course, we have to accept that we haven't had that kind of smooth year where not just the impact of mental health needs, escalating mental health needs and social emotional mental health needs for children, but also the fact that our schools haven't had the opportunity to be able to have that kind of smooth interaction with the Eip practitioners as well, and to gain that practice consistently throughout the year. So I think we're slightly further behind than we would have hoped to have been if we'd had a smooth year forward. So the other thing is, I think there's a whole area around transition experience for children that we've started to have an impact on this year, but we'd like to do much more on that. So the plans for that we'd like to see move forward in the next year. The speech, language and communication practitioner who we have commissioned on behalf of Schools Forum, Sarah Patel is the lady's name, and she starts in post with us in July on a sort of on a fewer number of days, but she'll be starting to work very specifically with early years and secondary schools to start with in the autumn term, and then in the spring term moving across to primaries. And the reason that Caroline's just taken that decision to do that is we feel that there's been a lot of input to primaries, and there's probably a bit of overwhelm really with the number of practitioners. So that's the reason that we're doing that. And obviously the early years settings as children move across are very important as well. The providers meeting's very energetic, and it's providing that kind of invaluable coordination. We can see that's absolutely a crucial part of the jigsaw puzzle in making sure that all the practitioners, not just the ones who are involved in these recovery plan projects as part of the interventions that we're commissioning, but also the wider partnership work. We're really seeing some exciting developments and some really good shared experience there as well. There are some significant priorities for the next year. I talk about the secondary IP development. We've been piloting ways of working with the 3 secondary schools over the summer term, and we're just at the point where we're going to move into evaluating those. Caroline's just starting that work now. To check in with the secondary schools about how things have gone with that. The feedback so far has been very, very positive, but we want to evaluate that and present that back to you. We're thinking we won't at this stage be able to move in terms of capacity to a similar process to the primary panel for EIP. I think it'll just be a complete overwhelm in terms of the number of potential cases. So doing this very tailored, specific, very bespoke work, working really closely with secondary schools seems to be the right way forward for the next phase at least. And to see how that goes. But that seems to be working pretty well at the moment, and it's good to have Stuart's feedback on that so far today. Thank you. In terms of nurture interventions, the nurture interventions that happen either as outreach from Edith Weston or in the school for some children, where children have that intervention and they move into either back into Edith Weston if that's their actual school, or we hope in the future to back to schools where they've begun their journey, which is the ideal really. We can see that although that business case was predicated on 2 children, there's actually been a significant number more children really. We think 7 children who've been supported by the provision, by the interventions there. So that's incredibly encouraging, and I do think there are certainly children, when we look at the lists of cases, who would otherwise not be in Rutland schools potentially. So we want to look at what that looks like going forward, and I'll be working with Sharon over the summer to think about what happens next after the pilot really. So thank you to Sharon and the team there. The work continuing thinking about the early years inclusion pathway pathway, sorry, is moving on. It's really encouraging sort of feedback from the schools. A meeting today looking at options for that, for a sustainable business model. Very exciting. Thinking about what we need to do next and where the gaps are. We know we're going to be commissioning some play therapy interventions over the autumn. We're trialing a couple of different providers just to see how which fits best with schools, and obviously the SLCN, the speech language communication, needs professionals start. We also have been working with Rob, who's been leading, if you like, on the SENCO network work, and we want to draw in the regional whole school send resources to that. So we're working with Rob on what that might look like going forward. We want to build on what we've got that works really for SENCOs. We need it to be proportionate, helpful, and actually successful in terms of having the impact we want it to for the recovery plan as well, of course. Secondary school places. So thinking about next over the next year, we've been working with our secondary education providers to think about what does what type of facilities, what type of arrangements might we need to put in place to maintain children in mainstream education as far as possible, to keep them as close as they can to their mainstream education. And that expression of interest process that I've set out in the paper, I don't need to go into the detail of it perhaps, is underway. The timeline, we've received the submissions, and decision date is next week. It's quite a punishing timeline to make sure that we have the right amount of provision available for children for 2022. So we are moving quite quickly on this. One of the imperatives for that is that we have only one of the imperatives, I have to say, but is that there is a capital allocation that we can use. We've had this additional funding from the DFE, which added to the resources that we already have in terms of capital. It has the potential to deliver facilities, let's put it that way, to support children at secondary school. And so we're inviting expressions of interest to look at what models of provision might work. We'd like to, we've looked at other counties. We're working on what might work both with our education providers now, but also, what exciting practices are out there that could keep children locally, and because that's the right thing for them. That's probably a canter through the paper, but I don't know whether people have had a chance to look. I thought it was worth putting some level of the risk log in front of you, because that's how, in terms of the programme, it's a way of monitoring whether the risk is acceptable or unacceptable. And I felt at this stage it was probably quite important for you to have sight of that on a regular basis. So you can see how the risks are being monitored. You can see we've got a number of amber risks, but they're all about individual. Many of them are around how individual schools might choose to act, and so collectively we have the opportunity as part of Schools Forum to support schools to act in a way that's going to be successful for the recovery plan for these projects. So it's worth you having sight of those. There's a lot of detail around the secondary school cohort, but I wanted you to have sight of that as well in terms of the numbers of the pressures. So you could see the scale, if you like, of what we're trying to do with that, and work with you on that. And then in Appendix C, it lays out how the EIP has evolved so that you can see what you're getting really, I suppose, in terms of resource, the impact that COVID has had and where that's paused the arrangements over the last year. It charts the decision making that's been made and issues and solutions. And it gives you some sense of the sort of qualitative and quantitative outcomes that we're seeing already. Yeah, that's that, and some information about the secondary education inclusion offer pilot.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Louise. Any questions for Louise? Okay, Louise, do you need us to make any decisions at this stage?
I think I think to make an actual decision, we probably needed to be in person. So it's really about affirmation of the progress and the decision that we're the kind of the plans that we have over the next year. Really, that's what I'm looking for.
Well, can I ask a question just to get the ball rolling then? At what point are we going to be in a position, do you suppose, to be able to evaluate whether in fact the recovery plan is successful? And by successful, I mean in terms of, because this is Schools Forum, in terms of actually saving money from the special educational needs and disabilities budget, high needs block, so that we can then get that overspend down a bit. When will we do that? Because I mean, obviously we've had this going for now a couple of years. Is it going to take another year or 2 years? At what point would we be in a position to do that?
Andrew, I think. Sorry, Andrew.
I was just going to say I'll pick up that answer, Carl. The modelling suggests that we already are going to be saving money from the projects that are in place. The issue is that demand is still outstripping the level of savings we can get. That's one of our big problems. If we're having 12.5, somewhere between 12.5% and 15% increase in EHCPs in the year, with the small amount of budget we've got, that's a huge proportion of increase for any recovery plan to be able to deal with and manage. What we'd hope is over time, the steps we're putting in place, as Louise said earlier, is around whole system change, and we can get more around prevention. And as we get through cases that are already in the system working through, that's when we will see some larger change. So at the minute, and it will probably be at the next Schools Forum, I can talk you through the model, the assumptions in the model, what savings we're proposing against each different element, and how we've come up with those level of assumptions. So happy to do that at the next Schools Forum.
That would be good, because I think that members, representatives need to, in order to be able to make a sensible judgment on whether the recovery plan is doing what it was intended to do, they need information presented which addresses that very issue. Is it saving money? I mean, everyone accepts and understands demand might be outstripping supply, as it were, and that's notwithstanding, but is it still doing that? And if so, can we have the evidence that assures us of that fact?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions colleagues have for Louise on the matter of the recovery plan?
Louise, I just think it's worth reiterating what Stuart said earlier. I think that the inclusion partnership's been absolutely first class. I think the quality, the speed of the response, the quality of the intervention, it's just been terrific. So sitting here, I think it's, I know we need to look at the financial aspect, but when you're looking at quality of provision, it's been terrific. So thank you.
Okay.
And I'd also like to say exactly the same. It's been brilliant, and I think it's really turned around the support that we're able to offer our children immediately, and as Rob said, with such a high standard, and you know that needs celebrating for a small county, and that, you know, we're quite far forward in our thinking with that, because talking to colleagues in Lincolnshire and other areas, that doesn't happen in the same way. So I think that does really need celebrating.
Okay, any dissenters from that line? Because if not, that's, I think, probably useful feedback for you, Louise, there. You've sort of merged item 5 and 6 together, am I correct?
Sorry, Carl, I did have a point. I did have my hand up.
Stuart, sorry, beg your pardon.
That's all right. I just, the point that was asked about the recovery plan, I think the Schools Forum, and it ties in with the inclusion partnership, have to accept that this is not going to be a 1 or 2 year turnaround. This is a long-term plan that is going to take years to actually start to come to fruition, and it links in with what our primary colleague said about the funding for EHC plans. The whole point of this is early intervention to reduce the need for EHCs, and particularly very expensive ones that we can't afford. Sure. The two are very interconnected, and we're not going to see, I don't think, in 12 months or 2 years, an immediate impact on this. It is very long term and requires patience on our behalf to start to see the fruit of that labour. And I said this yesterday, I'm pleased to hear that we're going to start doing some work in the early years sector, because that's where actually we'll really feel the benefit of it in 5 or 10 years' time, when we do early intervention that young, before they even get to primary. And there's no magic wand to this, and it's not going to suddenly reduce. And if we increase the funding into EHC plans, it's going to come out of the mainstream and impact on every child. The answer is early intervention and be patient with the impact of it. It's not going to be easily financially modelled.
No.
Well, Stuart, I take your point. I fully agree with it. I think the issue is that there are a number of smaller primary schools that are at the precipice now.
Well, Rob, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with anything anyone's saying. I'm just trying to say that, look, there's only one.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that.
And any money we take from one bit of the pie comes out of another piece of pie. And my view is that the work that SEND is doing in the county, I don't always agree with their decisions. I'll be the first to say that as well. But that long-term view is definitely the right view. And as a small county, we're actually in a great place for all of us to get around the table and say, we're going to commit to this and buy into that approach over a longer period.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anybody else on this specific item? Because I'm very conscious of the agenda, and any time we might have at the end to revisit the matter that we raised earlier.
That's incredibly helpful. Sorry, Carl, I just need to just make sure that we have noted what we need to note, but particularly around approval and extension of the Education Inclusion Partnership coordination function, that we feel that is a worthwhile part of the commitment. I think I'm seeing nods around the room, so thank you very much for that. I just want to be able to put that onto a cabinet paper if I need to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I say something,
Mary,
Carl?
please, yeah.
To do with the inclusion and the intervention from the nursery aspect, we find it is important, like everything else with the early years, but at this moment we are struggling, not just financially. Can you hear me? Because I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you, Mary.
Okay. It's not just about the finances, it's also about the support and the learning that the early years team needs. We need to be able to be trained a little bit better than what we are, and we need to have more support from the inclusion team in order to make sure that while the children are with us, children with special needs or additional needs, we are giving them what they really need, so that when they go to school, then the need to have an ECH plan is not that necessary, just more input need to be given. But we just feel that at the moment, the early years intervention is not good enough.
Thank you. Now, Louise, you wanted some kind of indication from people that there was a broad approval. I mean, we're not going to take a vote on it, I don't think, but a broad approval that the contract be extended, whilst all the points that people have made have been noted. Is anybody understanding anything different to that? And if so, please speak now. Otherwise, I'll say to Louise, yeah, well, it seems like there's broad approval for continuing. Okay, well, I'll take that silence then to be an affirmation, Louise. All right.
That's perfect. Thanks so much, Carl.
Okay, school capacity, pupil place planning, Jill.
Helps if I unmute. I will be very quick with this one. I had got some data, but what I'll do is I'll give that to Jane to include in the agenda. Sorry, brain had gone then, Jane, completely. Basically, what we've seen is the secondary school admissions for September 2021. All Rutland's resident children have been offered a place at their preferred school. All 3 Rutland secondary schools are oversubscribed quite significantly in some cases. Primary school admissions, all Rutland resident children have been offered a place at their preferred school. And we do actually have number now of 5, in fact, primary schools that are also oversubscribed. So we are seeing, the numbers holding up well in our primary schools and secondary schools from a schools forum funding point of view. The actual secondary school admission numbers is 2021 was 377, 2020 was 347, and September 2019 was 371. So it's a similar sort of picture. We're not seeing a particularly increase or decrease. And in our primary school admissions, we are seeing a slightly lower number admitted applying for a place in a Rutland school this year. 344 this year compared with 345 last year and 359 the year before. That figure appears to be certainly replicated across the East Midlands and possibly wider. That slight decline in places requested for this this coming academic year for primary school admissions.
Okay, thank you, Jill.
And SCAP will be more I was just going to say, and SCAP will be more formally reported on and in future meetings. It's currently being undertaken at the moment, the school capacity assessment.
Have we got any questions for Jill? No questions, Jill, so thank you very much for that. So we move on to early years update, and Mary. Mary, can you hear me?
I don't think Mary is with us today.
She was.
There
She
you go.
spoke earlier.
I've managed to unmute again.
There we go.
Mary is Ang 3S21, snappily titled.
All right.
Go for it, Mary.
I'm sure you've received the paper that I've sent to you regarding the disbandment of the previous school forum working group.
That's page 43, yeah.
Yeah, and also that we are hoping, if it's okay with the schools forum, to start a new working group to cover more aspects of the early years. We have achieved most of what we set out to do originally, but more and more we're finding within the early years that we need to be more proactive, and RCC needs to be more transparent. And we feel that this new working group should be led by the early years sector, and with invitations to different aspects of like inclusion, childminders, primary schools with nurseries attached, representation from the school forums, and the county council. We feel that there's so many things going on at the moment, namely about the SEND, which Denise quite mentioned a few minutes ago, that we are finding it a struggle. I'm sorry, my voice keeps going. We're finding it a struggle to do a lot of intervention with the children. A, we're not fully trained, and B, it's taken up so much time and it's costing the nurseries a lot. We are trying to make sure that every child that comes in our door is treated equally. And we're finding early in the early years that the SEND children, or the additional needs children, are taking up a lot of time and overwhelming the nurseries. Just like the primary schools were saying, we've got to look after everybody, and we feel that this group moving forward could be looking at how we can do this through training, through finances. So I'm hoping to set the group up for the 29th of June at 10 a.m. and I'll send out invites to all of you. But I would like to know if anybody wants to give me any agenda items that we could put forward. But the first two we would like to discuss is about funding, and the SEND funding needs to be risen, because at this moment it's given us £10 an hour, and we feel that that's been £10 an hour for many years, and it's not helpful in the amount of work that's expected of us to do, like completing the ECH plans or speech and language plans, anything like that.
Sure.
So if anybody would like to join, sorry about my voice, if anybody would like to join, could you please get in contact with me? And I will be sending out an email to all of you, inviting you to come to the first meeting.
That's great, Mary. Thank you for this. So just to be clear to colleagues, so this is not, as the working party was before, this is not a local authority led body. This is the suggestion here is that this is led by early years providers, but local authority representation is invited on it. So that's effectively the way around that. Okay. Did anybody want to make anything in relation to this point or ask Mary any questions?
I've got my hand up, Carl.
Okay, Andrew, yeah.
I just want to flag to Mary that it's unlikely that there's going to be finance representation on the 29th of June. We're interviewing for a role in the finance team that day, and I'm on the interview panel, and so is Naomi Clark, the accountant responsible. So it's unlikely that I'm not going to be able to make, or a finance representation is able to make that date. I'm committed to attending, as I was the early years working party, and happy to attend. I just want to flag early that it's unlikely that there's going to be a finance representation there.
Okay, well,
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, matters regarding the format of that forum and who will attend and so on is a matter that Mary will resolve those individuals. So I won't dwell on that in this particular forum, if that's all right with colleagues at the moment. Any other questions for Mary?
Could I just say that we will be feeding back to, we would like our own agenda item at the school forum, and we will always feed back to you with what has been discussed and any results coming from our discussions. So you will be kept fully informed.
Thank you, Mary. That's brilliant. And I am right in saying, Mary, aren't I, that this will be your last meeting? Or am I wrong, actually? I think I'm wrong, aren't I? You've got one more.
I've got one more.
Yeah, sorry, do beg your pardon. Yeah. No. Great. Well, in that case, then we get on to any other business. Now, colleagues, it's 2 minutes to 5. Now, I'm quite happy to propose an extension of 10 minutes to the forum, but of course you may have other things to do, quite rightly. So because I can't see you all properly, it's quite difficult to know that you're all... Has anybody got an objection to me formally extending the meeting by 10 minutes?
I'm really sorry, Carl, but I've got to go into a governor's meeting, so I will have to leave. But if, you know, I'll obviously read the minutes and catch up on the last 10 minutes.
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Okay, well, in that case, then I'll take that as an approval. So we'll extend this by 10 minutes, starting from now. Now, going back to Sharon and to Rob, because you've both got some really, serious concerns, and we're not going to resolve them today, but at least we can maybe find a way of moving forward on how we can resolve them. Sharon, maybe I could start with you this time. Sharon, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah, I've just unmuted, Carl. Apologies. Yeah. I think I have really shared earlier on when Rob brought it up earlier, just the real concern over the the funding for SEN, for EHCPs in particular, that it's not covering the EHCP supports, never mind the other children who have SEN needs as well, and then obviously the provision for all children. So it really is a concern around that. We've contacted the ESFA, who obviously, and we've already mentioned, have sent us back to the local authority and schools forum.
Mm. Okay,
that's the same.
Rob,
that's exactly the same. The ESFA pointed us back towards school forum and the local authority as well. I think I'd just like to put a working party together. I wouldn't mind sitting around the table trying to thrash something out, whether it's finances or it's different strategies. But we genuinely do need to look at something because it's quite urgent. I'd also like to understand the discrepancy between the Lincolnshire or the counties' funding streams compared to.
Can I just suggest, if we do a working party, we need the LA's financial support, because I think what Rob is asking for is reasonable in terms of benchmarking what other local authorities pay for EHCP plans, probably in terms of TA hour costs, I would guess, and then also modelling what the impact of that would be on the high needs budget, because we have to understand the implications of what we would be suggesting. because I'm sympathetic, as I'm hopefully you can tell, but I'm also very conscious that we're talking about a recovery plan that's already causing significant deficit, and any increase to TA hours is going to increase that further.
Yeah, it's interesting, Stuart, as well. But what's become quite apparent as well is the mechanism of the funding, where Rutland, you rightly say, fund TA hours, where some other local authorities just give you a pot of money instead.
And I would agree, Rob, I would far prefer, and I've been fighting this battle for years, to get rid of this nominal TA hours, which mean nothing. They constrain us, they don't allow us to support children appropriately. And I think there's better ways to do it. And I've said that for since I've been head for over, 13 years this week.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, yeah.
It's not helpful limiting TA hours. I'd rather have a pot of funds, as I'm sure you would.
Yeah, it causes friction with parents as well, Stuart.
Absolutely, and it causes me problems when they come from primary into secondary. There's an expectation the TA follows them round, and it's useless to everybody.
And it's that whole independence, part of them, that's why a working party would be brilliant. Let's look at the strategy.
I have to say, I do think we might actually make some savings, because if we get away from being constrained to having to employ TAs, we'll use the money more flexibly, improve outcomes for children, and perhaps save some money. And I think that is something we could all get behind.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
No, that seems like a really good suggestion. Yeah. Any other points in relation to this? Because Rob's kindly volunteering to kind of do the legwork on setting up a separate forum, which would enable the matter to be aired more fully. But I think it's right to say that the local authority really need to be at that meeting in order for us to be properly informed about the situation. Now, Andrew, you did say you were okay to feed back to the forum on these matters. Would you be willing to do some, provide some information for us to facilitate this meeting?
Yes, but I will caveat to say it depends on the timescales we're putting on that, without having what the working party want in front of you.
I think that's a fair point. I think we'd need involvement from someone like Louise, who understands how the EHCs have to fulfil statutory obligations as well. And I think this is quite a significant piece of work. I think it's an important one. And rather than try and rush it this term, I would suggest we try and get a working party together that looks at it perhaps in September, and we agree a remit for that working party formally as part of the schools forum.
Can I say so? Can I?
Yeah, please,
say
Dawn,
something, Carl? Or Chair, sorry. I think what you've just, what all of you, Sharon, Rob, and Stuart, have just described is really, really valuable. But I would echo the sentiment in terms of the timing, because I think we're all in agreement that some of the system isn't working, and what we really want to do is take this as an opportunity to really get underneath not just necessarily the funding around the EHC plans themselves, but looking at kind of separating out children on SEN support, thinking about also the children on EHCPs, but also how we're using the graduated approach as well, and kind of trying to bring all of that together within that working party. And as you've just said, it's going to be vital that we have finance input into that, but I think Bernadette and Louise are vital to
Very
that
much so.
discussion too. So I absolutely welcome that approach. And I think the timing, like we said about the recovery plan, the recovery plan as it stands is a 5-year recovery plan, but actually we've probably lost a year due to the COVID pandemic and kind of the response to that. So realistically, we're talking a very long-term recovery plan anyway, and that's probably only to bring us into a balanced position as opposed to a savings. So
I also suggest we try
Good.
To do it. The EIP meetings have been particularly effective because we're doing it face to face, and I think it would be good if we had if there is a group of us who are interested in this and doing some work for Schools Forum, that we do it in a venue. I'm happy to host if it's helpful, or go somewhere else if not. But I think it'd be quite useful to get us in a room and we can share things, I think, far more easily than across Zoom.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Absolutely, yes. Now, I mean, I'm hearing from Rob and Sharon that the matter, while we understand education is a long-term business and the investments don't, in financial terms, pay the dividends for 20, 30 years, which is a problem with education policy making nationally, because, you know, the people making the decisions on allocating the resources won't be around to actually see the benefits of that spending. Nevertheless, Rob and Sharon are telling me at the moment, or I'm hearing, that there are schools where this matter is facing a imminent crisis.
That's true.
And therefore, no matter what we say about how long this will carry on, in terms of recovery plans and so on, their budget will have to balance in the short term. Otherwise, they go under. That's it. That won't, we can't wait on that. We won't be able to wait on that. The law doesn't allow them to wait on that. So all those things notwithstanding, I do think still there is a real problem I can hear, which they're expressing, which is now. So, I mean, it's up to you, because it's not my business to decide, but Rob, you volunteered to set this group up. If you want to set it up before the summer, so be it. I kind of leave you and Sharon, obviously, to decide on how you want to do that. That's not for me to say.
I don't think you can unilaterally say that, Carl.
I'm not unilaterally saying it's.
No, all I'm suggesting is that, you know, you can have another talking shop, but if it's going to be formalised, we need proper local authority support as well as broader support, because it affects
absolutely, Stuart,
every school in the county. And the
absolutely, I'm not deciding anything, Stuart. I'm saying that Rob, as the person who's volunteered to set up the group, that's a matter for him to decide, not for me to decide. So therefore he can do that. And, you know, because it's independent of the forum doesn't have any authority to direct it one way or another. So that's just a point that I'm noting. So Rob, you know, just aware.
What would be really useful is if Sharon and I spend some time hooking up, and what we could do is just draft some ideas about what sort of scenario building or financial modelling that we would need from the local authority, just to inform those discussions. So Sharon and I can sort that, and then
we'll arrange a time.
Yeah, that sounds like a good suggestion. Now, obviously, we're coming up to 10 past, so I'm conscious of the time. So I'd like to ask colleagues if there's anything else in relation to this or any other points that they would like to make now. If not, we just do also have the forward plan, the Schools Forum forward plan, which is on page 47 of your pack. You'll notice we're on June at the moment, where we have the extension of the contract identified, which we've done. September, the reporting items on the September meeting are listed there. Just want to ask if everybody's happy with those. If they are, then that's all good. Thank you very much, colleagues. At that point, then, I will officially close the meeting. We're at 5:09. Sorry about all the problems, the technical problems. It isn't good enough. We need to resolve that. It has caused difficulties with this meeting, but thank you for your forbearance on all of that.
Oh, before it's very quickly, I need to tender my resignation from this Schools Forum as of this meeting.
Well, thank you for saying that, Bob. And may I say, first of all, personally, I think the work you've done in adult learning in Rutland has been absolutely first class, and you're a man of great integrity who's done an excellent job. So personally, from me, I'd just like to pay tribute to that at this occasion while we're just in forum. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, and I hope to be able to meet up with you before you depart the scene, as it were. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I will end things now. Really pleased, really thankful that you stayed the extra 10 minutes. And yeah, we'll meet again in September. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Scott.